Well, a huge welcome, everyone, to A Taste of Borderless. My name's Carol Campaign, and I am the director of the diversity practice and also one of the founders of Borderless Coaching. And it's fantastic to be here once again with you this afternoon come evening. So here we are again in the hot seat of race in the coaching space, and ready to dig deep. And as I said previously, to give you a taste of Borderless, and so glad that you're here with us. So I'm sure you're familiar, and I'm familiar too, that issues of difference, specifically racism, continue to abound. So what have we experienced since the last time we were in this hot seat? I'm sure you're all familiar again with Sainsbury's advert of a Black family simply having Christmas lunch, which caused a huge uproar on social media. Virgin Media responded to that in support of Sainsbury's. Again, both of them taking a strong position with regards to Black Lives Matter. Lewis Hamilton's latest win, which, in terms of, which is quite historic, in his acceptance speech, he talked in a heartbreaking way about experiencing racism. Then we come to the anxiety of the US elections. I must say there was a point at which I was going to sue Donald Trump, the whole of the United States, and particularly him, but realized there would be many following in my footsteps or going before me. And now we have the first Black woman of Black Jamaican and also Asian Indian descent as the vice president. And this has revealed a huge amount, not just about the United States, but also about the world in general. And more recently, we've had the recent murder of a Black man by security guards in Brazil. So we are still and continue to be in unprecedented, exceptional, that word, apocalyptic times. And even more firmly, I believe that coaching is a powerful vehicle for not just individual, but organizational, societal, and global change. So the last time we were together, we asked you why you were here and want to remind you of the big why. And your why ranged from, I want to be a more inclusive coach. I recognize that this is vital to my coaching practice. I'm passionate about coaching that aligns with my purpose as a coach. Coaching in the United Kingdom is underpinned predominantly by white Western capitalist paradigms, and that needs to change. Some of the issues that my clients are dealing with are underlined with racism. As an experienced coach, I'm acutely aware of the big gap. Now listen, this is as an experienced coach, I have a big gap in my experience and expertise in terms of inclusion and diversity. We also took away some important themes, just quickly paying that back to you. First, the dynamics of difference are always in the coaching space. Race matters in the coaching relationship. And this isn't new, it's just ignored. Coaches must do their own deep, authentic work on self. And as I said, coaches are a powerful vehicle for change. But the big question is, so how do we really equip ourselves to respond to the urgency of now? Who do I need to be? What do I need to do to be a powerful borderless coach? One that crosses the barriers of difference, really is able to deal with my own presumptions, assumptions, stereotypes, and all the other isms. And to answer that question, a few years ago, we developed our own framework, and that's called Borderless Coaching. And the time is now to reveal it. So this evening, we'd like to introduce you to this pioneering methodology and give you a snippet, a taste of Borderless. So just in terms of Zoom protocol, this will be a very interactive session, just like the last time. Please use vigorously the chat function when prompted or otherwise. For questions, please use the Q&A function. We're going to be taking questions at the end. And note this session will be recorded. We're here for 75 minutes in total, no breaks, please. Make sure you've got everything that you need. I've got my water right beside me and I'm sitting comfortably. We really want you to be present and with us. So as I said to you, maybe the last time, I never travel alone. And so here with me again this evening, first of all, is Laurie Shook. Laurie, I'm sure, is familiar to many of you, but if not, she has been a coach since 1997 and is a master coach since 2001. She's coached everyone. She is our guru. She has worked extensively with the Coactive Training Institute, CR Global, and Performance Consultants. So welcome, Laurie. Great to have you sitting here and with us this afternoon.
Pleasure.
Andrew Bidnell. Andrew is a certified PCC International Coach Federation coach. He again has done CTI and an MBA from Manchester Business School. Andrew is our energy, and he really keeps, he really kind of keeps us going and focused. And when we lose direction, well, he doesn't really help us bring us back, but he takes us to an even bigger place. He works extensively globally and has a passion for this work. Paul Anthony. Paul is a coach with a real deep passion to serve, empower, and to transform his clients. So hopefully soon we shall see him. He shall appear there. He is. Welcome, Paul. His commitment is so that his clients grow and fulfill their potential. He uses his self as an instrument of change. He is the operation behind what we do along with Barbara. He has qualifications, a master's in international business, a PhD, is also a coactive coach as well, and has done NTL. So I think you'll all agree that this tribe is both powerful and compelling, and we're still on this journey ourselves. So without much ado, I'm going to hand over to Andrew. Andrew, please take us away.
Thank you so much, Carol. Hi, everybody. I know there's a number of you who are with us on our last session, so it's fantastic. Welcome back. And for those of you who are joining for the first time, one of the beautiful things that came out of our last session was lots of activity going on the chat and an opportunity for us to check in with you from time to time and hear your views. We're very much aware that there is a lot of experienced coaches out there, and so we want to tap in and learn from you and encourage you to share as we go through. And with that in mind, I would like to share you some thoughts around this idea of what makes up an anti-racist coach, and just check in with you on that. One of the themes that came out of our last conversation was it's not good enough to be a coach who isn't racist. We need to be anti-racist coaches. And Carol talked about borderless coaching. One of the borders that we need to cross there is around race. And so what does it mean to be an anti-racist coach? What are the characteristics of an anti-racist coach? So very soon up in front of you are going to come 10 characteristics that we'd like to share with you, and also invite you to consider which of these rings most true for you. Clearly there are many, many more, and we're going to ask you a polling question that you can see there. So our question really is, what are the 3 characteristics of an anti-racist coach? Let me just run through them first, just so that you see them. Yeah. So there's the first idea here is an anti-racist coach is authentic. So real, rooted, and really comfortable in their own skin. If I move my poll, I think you can move the poll. If you can't see this, if it's just covering the slide, you can move it to the side. So really authentic. Secondly, understands the impact of race, intersectionality, power, and privilege. So that's a second kind of characteristic. Thirdly, a really important element there is uses their own diversity and identity as a powerful resource in coaching conversations. And we're going to be touching on that as we go throughout this session. Thirdly, does a lot of deep work themselves. So builds their own self-awareness, aware of, and also manages their own bias, prejudice, and stereotypes that they have. Fifthly, we all know as coaches that we use powerful, provocative questions, but in particular, an anti-racist coach, a borderless coach, uses those questions to uncover and navigate difference. Sixth characteristic, skillfully encouraging yourself, but also your client to sit with this idea of discomfort about race. So where's the discomfort in a conversation about race? 7, acknowledges, values, and champions diversity as a strength. We'll touch on that a little bit later too. Number 8, courageous and intentional in exploring race in the coaching space. Sometimes that needs some courage in order to get into it. So it really courage and intentional about exploring that race. Number 9, this idea of listening, we all know that coaches listen, but the idea of turning up that listening to hear what's not being said, really turning up that listening muscle to hear what's not being said and exploring that, not just what is being said. And number 10, withholding judgment, stepping into and honoring a client's lived experience. Those are 10, and there are many others, and you will have your own experience. But those are 10 characteristics that we would put on the table of being the characteristics of an anti-racist coach. And you should have a poll in front of you, hopefully. And I know a number of you are already voting on that, which is fantastic. So we're encouraging you to just to vote, give yourself 3 votes. And we're curious, what would you say are the top 3 out of the list of 10 for you as you join this call today and you reflect on your own experience, maybe as a client, maybe as a coach? What would you say are the top 3 characteristics of an anti-racist coach? And we'll see, we have an opportunity to share our different thoughts as a group today. So we'll see what comes up for us. So I'll just give you a little bit, about half of you have voted so far. So those of you who haven't, just take a moment to vote on what you think are the top 3 characteristics. I'll just pause for a second while you do that. I can tell you that there are votes in every single category so far. So there are different things are ringing true for different ones amongst you. And it's interesting to hear that. Maybe we can just flick back to the previous slide, Barbara. That would be fantastic, just so we've got those full explanations in front of us. Fantastic, thank you. I'll just give you another 10 seconds to make your 3 votes, and then let's see where we're at. I can see in the chat, Dorothy's saying, they all feel important. Absolutely. And these are not in any order of importance, but we're curious around, for you as an audience right now, what are the 3 that ring true for you? And if you can't vote for some reason, sometimes some of the browsers, the polling doesn't work, then feel free to pop up into the chat the 3 numbers that ring true for you. And some of you are doing that already, so that's fantastic. 1, 3, 5, 4, 3. Thank you, Veronica. You're doing that. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for putting those in. Okay, I'm going to close out in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I'm super curious, Barbara, if you maybe could share the results so that we can see what's coming up here. Okay, so the top one, for top ones for you as a group. So second one there, understanding impact of race, intersectionality, power and privilege. 63% of you have highlighted that one. Doing the deep work, aware of managing own bias, prejudice and stereotypes. That too is a 63%. And I'm just looking here at the next one. The next one was right at the bottom, withholding judgment. This idea of stepping into and honoring a client's lived experience. So our top 3, and again, it's not to say that the others aren't important, and it's also not to say that there are things that are not on there too, but our top 3, understanding the impact of race, intersectionality, power and privilege, doing the deep work, so really being aware of and managing your own bias, prejudice and stereotypes, and number 3, withholding judgment, stepping into and honoring a client's lived experience. So we have a second question for you, a second poll, just to reflect on those top 3. And the invitation is to ask yourselves, on a scale of 1 to 5, where would you rate yourself against those characteristics? Where would you rate yourself against those characteristics? So you can vote there, number 1, low on those characteristics, number 3, medium, number 5, high. Where are you feeling? So you just get 1 vote on this one. Where would you rate yourself against those 3 characteristics? And I can see the votes coming in and they're moving along. We've got quite a few in the middle so far. Middle is in the work. We've got some at 1, some at 2, some at 5, some at 4. I'll give you just a few more seconds and see We're over 3/4 of you have voted so far. A little bit more. Okay, maybe we can share the results there, Barbara. Fantastic, thank you. So about half of us on our call today are saying, I'm kind of in the middle on those three things, yeah? I'm kind of in the middle, which is an opportunity for growth and also an opportunity to kind of recognize the strengths and the impact that you have. It's also good to see on the call that we have people, you know, rating themselves 4 and 5 around those, and we'll be interested as we move through. Please chip in and you'll have an opportunity to share your thoughts and reflections and experiences. And also, there are people at 1, or I think one person has put 1 and somebody has put 2 in terms of their feeling, right, I need to do some work around those characteristics, do some further work. Fantastic. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of just start with that and have a sense of, right, this is where I'm sitting with some of the things that we're going to be talking about. Maybe in the chat, you would, we'd invite you to just pop in other characteristics that you feel are particularly important, or other particular behaviors that you feel are perhaps aren't captured in these 10 characteristics so far. So feel free to pop up into the chat other characteristics of an anti-racist coach, borderless coach, that you feel is important. Okay, so I'm gonna just look at the chat. There should be some stuff going into the chat, so feel free to use that chat. And I'm gonna hand over to Paul, who's gonna unpack some of this a little bit more and talk through our borderless coaching framework, and you'll see how it fits in. Thank you for starting us off there in the chat. I can see those coming in, so please keep going with that. Paul, over to you. Although you just need to take your mute off.
Thank you, Andrew. And it's, you know, it's fascinating to see the results that were coming through and the areas that people feel are the priority areas. You know, all of those characteristics that you've seen there are in one way or another encapsulated in what we term borderless coaching. And borderless coaching came out of observing and reflecting on how we were coaching. As practitioners in the space of diversity and inclusion, but trained as executive coaches, we found that we were inevitably in our coaching going to that place of identity in our coaching practice. And the real trigger was actually when Carol was coaching someone and was just noticing the degree of differences in the space between herself and this person that she was coaching. You know, there was Carol as this Black woman of a faith, heterosexual, of a particular age, coaching a white man that had no faith, that was gay, and was younger as well. And in noticing those differences, the question arose, how do we actually intentionally use those differences to increase the impact of the coaching that we were having? And I'm gonna ask Laurie to come on at this point. Hi, Laurie.
Hey.
Hi, Laurie. And I, you know, just pose the question to you. You know, you heard me say about intentionally using ourselves in the coaching, intentionally using those differences, a concept we call the triple helix. And I wondered whether you could help just share your explanation, understanding of what that is.
Absolutely. So the triple helix, the triple helix is recognizing that there are three entities present. There's me, the coach, there's the client's coachee, and there's the relationship between. And we're always creating something together. And for me, this is about vulnerability. Other people may experience it differently, and you may have designed it differently. But for me, it's about being open to the relationship, being open to the other person, and leaning in. And something else gets created. When you get to lean in and observe everything, all the differences, something magical happens. And it's so then you can use all three strands of this triple helix. And I found that for me, again, the key, being open and vulnerable and what's there, rather than trying to be buttoned up and, you know, like this, because you miss out. You know, there's the difference that happens, you know, a block that happens there. Lean in, trust, be open, and that arises.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you for put in what I would have put in a very technical way, in a way that that really resonates with me and hopefully with everybody else. And that intentionality in using our difference in that coaching space is very much reflected in the borderless model that we subsequently derived. And we think of it as a key, because as a key, what we're looking to do is to unlock more, unlock more in that coaching space, unlock the differences that are in that coaching space, unlock an extra 30% that we can get out of the coaching relationship. Yes. And in terms of the model of itself, I'm just going to put that up on the screen so that you can see for yourself what I'm talking about. Here we go. Put that up. We think in terms of some principles that underlie what we do, some practices which are really the way in which we do it, and some behaviors or tools that we use in our borderless way of coaching. And the principles are their authenticity, being deeply rooted and comfortable in our own skin, and actually using our diversity in a very intentional way as a powerful resource in that coaching conversation. Inclusive connection is about establishing deep, meaningful, third-level relationships that cross those borders of difference and really are built at that level of identity and difference. Diversity as a strength is a key principle. It's a mindset that we have, that our diversity is a positive, distinctive strength. There is nothing broken that needs being fixed because of our diversity, whatever that dimension of diversity is. But it also means placing that principle at the heart of the coaching relationship, of valuing it and integrating every part of who the client is. Mm. Those principles really are the foundation of borderless coaching and run throughout and are woven into the coaching relationships that we build. In terms of practices, we talk about inclusion EQ, inclusion emotional intelligence. That's, as so many of you pointed out, that is the deep work that we do on self. That awareness of our own and understanding of our own biases, our own stereotypes and our prejudices. It's also about skillfully managing those biases and stereotypes. It's also about recognizing our own responses to diversity and the emotional triggers that happen when our biases and our stereotypes are at play. Immersion as a practice, immersion, as some of you also picked out in terms of the key characteristics, that is that process of stepping into the shoes of and honoring difference, honoring the other person's differences, whether it be race, gender, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, whatever that difference might be. It's about holding multiple perspectives and embracing every part of who the client is without any judgment. Integration, well, integration is what we term, is the term we use about how we make use of the dynamics of difference that are there. That we intentionally seek to blend the different ways that we have of being, the different ways we have of doing things that come from our identity or our culture or our lived experiences, intentionally blending them into the coaching practice so that actually something new can be created in the coaching space. Mm. Beyond Borders is the practice of bringing all of this together, bringing the framework together to deliver coaching that's legacy driven and has the intention of creating a better world of inclusion, a better world of equality that transcends the borders that we have within us, as well as the borders that are outside of us in the wider society. The behaviors, the tools as such that we use, embracing discomfort, that's about how we skillfully encourage ourselves and our client to sit with the discomfort that we may have when that difference is in the coaching space, particularly when it comes to race. That question about how do you have a conversation about race, or I want to stop talking about race. reflects the discomfort that so many people have around it. So how do we as coaches then use that, encourage our clients to sit with that discomfort, valuing our difference, about acknowledging, valuing, championing diversity as a strength within that coaching conversation, using provocative questions to uncover the differences, to uncover the biases that may be there, and to navigate our way through. Orchestral listening, that's where we were referring to turning up the listening, to hear what's not being said. You know, the Japanese have a term, they call it listening to the air, listening to what's not being said as much as we are to what's being said. And particularly when it comes to race, that is a key skill, because so many people feel inhibited in one way or another in talking about race. Respectful curiosity, the last of the behaviors, that is about being deeply, genuinely curious and inquisitive in a way that fully honors and respects the difference of the client, the differences that the client may have. I've described the key in terms of just trying to bring out what those definitions, those understanding of the principles, the practices and behaviors are. I'm just going to ask Laurie, you know, you've used the key, you've used the model.
Yeah.
How have you used it? You know, bring this to life a little bit more.
Well, first, I just want to say, as I've listened to you talk it through again, I just realized how robust and comprehensive it is. So I'm just having an appreciation for this key at the moment, and how we do unlock our relationship, unlock the possibility of coaching. I've always said in all the coach training that I've done in 20 plus years is that this is coaching is an avenue of personal development, whether you like it or not. And then when we come and look at this key and talk about coaching across differences, it's just a whole other level of discovering ourselves. So diversity is a strength, absolutely. That can be cognitive, but how do we make it real? How do we go beyond our own internal borders, as you talked about? And that's what I feel like I've been working on, and I feel like I've just begun. How do I notice my own internal borders, and where are those, and how do I stretch beyond those and lean in? I was talking earlier about the triple helix. Lean in, find a new level of authenticity and appreciation for my difference compared to my client's difference. So, sorry, I wasn't sure if I was hearing somebody say something.
No, you're fine.
Okay. Yeah, so for me, when you said that about the borders within us, I think that was the biggest thing for me in using this key. Finding my own borders, getting through them, being able to ask provocative questions like I know how to do, but in a different new way, in a new territory, across borders, paying attention to race and other differences and using that rather than ignoring it. And that may sound like an easy thing to do. It wasn't or isn't for me, or hasn't been. It's getting easier. And I think that's true for a lot of people. We've been taught to ignore difference. So this is, let's not just ignore it. Let's use it. Let's have it be a complete benefit for this coaching relationship. And there's so much to explore there. And you guys talk about the 30%, you know, there's the missing 30%. There's so much more we can get out of the coaching relationship if we lean into that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that really talked to the key, but I've talked to my experience of using it.
No, thank you, Laurie. Yeah, and I think that, you know, it's very real and very genuine. And, you know, and I love the point you're making about, you know, moving away from an approach to coaching that that almost neuters the differences that we have, to actually using those differences in an intentional way to, you know, in service of the client, which is what our coaching is all about, you know, in service of the client.
Let's underline that. It is all in service of the client. So it's not just, oh, let me go on a personal development journey, but let me do my work so that it can be in service of the client.
Great, thank you. And, you know, you've heard from myself and Laurie just trying to describe the key, the framework, and talk about how it can be used. But as with all good coaching conversations and coaching webinars, we thought it would be interesting, at least, for you to experience what that might be like, and to give you what a taste, and emphasize a taste of borderless coaching might be like. And so with that in mind, I'm going to ask Carol and Andrew to come back and to give us a taste of Borderless.
Thank you so much, Paul and Laurie. It was fantastic to hear the key being spoken about in such depth. And so Andrew and I are going to have a go, and we're going to really apply that now in our own conversation with each other. So Andrew, hello.
Hello, Carol. I've switched off the chat. I'm not seeing what's going on in the chat. I'm just imagining it's just the two of us.
That is such a good idea, to do that. But I'm kind of just here with you and no one else. We're going to have what I think is an important, hopefully an important conversation. Now, in terms of setting this up, we've already, I'm the coach, you're the client, and I've already shared what Borderless coaching is, talked about the triple helix. This is about yourself. It's also about recognizing that I'm in the chair as well, and the dynamics of difference that is between you. And I'm going to be leaning in, as Laurie said, to that to explore what else and what more. We designed our inclusive alliance, and you've also given me your landscape of me, so I know a lot about you. Well, and now you're going to bring that to life. And so, Andrew, what is it that you'd like to explore in this session? What brings you here?
So this idea, and Laurie touched on it earlier, and it really rings true for me very much as well. Intellectually, I kind of get this idea of diversity being a real strength, and there's lots of creativity, and it's wonderful to be in groups of people and have diverse clients and bring difference. And I kind of get that intellectually. But I also notice that I fall back on what I have in common with people. And I feel more comfortable in building connections around similarity. And I noticed that although intellectually I might get this idea of difference being a great thing to have, in reality, I often ignore the differences and I focus on the similarities. And that frustrates me, and I'm kind of curious about that. So that's my topic, is how do I really embrace this in far more in my work, in my day-to-day life, this idea of difference being a real strength.
So what I'm hearing is that you get it in your head, like you said, intellectually you get it, but in terms of your heart, and also in terms of how you see yourself showing up in the world, you tend to really focus on what do we have in common. So why is that? Why is this important to you?
Because it's important for me as a coach, in that I really, I really believe that there's so much within the difference between myself and a client. And it's important to me in groups that I'm working with to focus on the differences and the different perspectives. And I'm not doing it. I don't know what's getting in the way of that. But I'm feeling that, I'm bumping against something which is stopping me going there as much as I want to.
I'm really loving the way that you're also leaning in and leaning forward, which gives me a sense that this is really, this is really important to you. And I know you well enough to know that when something is important to you, you work with it. You're not the kind of person to run away from what's right in front of you. So I guess there's so much in the difference in terms of differences. Let's explore the differences. We use this as an opportunity to explore maybe the differences between us. And so what would you say is different between yourself and myself?
As soon as you say that, I notice myself, oh, this is getting a little bit more edgy. I notice that. There's lots of differences between us. You're black, I'm white. We have a different cultural heritage to me. You're a woman, I'm a man. I don't know where age comes into that, Carol. We'll do a poll on that later. And there's a lot about, I don't know, a lot about your background, which is very different to my background. Lots of difference.
cultural heritage, age, gender. You know, I'm Black, you're white. So let's explore that difference in a little bit more detail. And, you know, one of the most notable differences, you know, I think that you've spoken to and you've alluded to is the difference in terms of race and gender. So let's explore that.
Mm.
So what is it that you value and appreciate about your difference being a white man, as a white man? What is it that you value and appreciate about that?
It's hard. That's, you know, it makes me pause that when you say that right now, because the word value makes me pause in terms of what do I value about being a white man right now. Automatically, that comes with kind of some guilt about being a white man right now. When I you know, I was reading, I've stopped talking to people about why I've stopped talking to white people about race. You know, I was reading some more of it yesterday. And so when you say what do I really value about being a white man, that's a tough one.
And I'm noticing that the deep pause, and you've talked about the guilt that comes with that. You've talked about shame. What other emotions are you experiencing? Can you label them?
Frustration, responsibility.
Okay. For say responsibility
for the impact that white men can often have often had.
Which is what is that responsibility?
Well, causing you know, racism. I go there, I see what's going on right now in different places, and associating myself as a white man with other white men who are saying and doing those things, is, you know, that's difficult. It's difficult. That's frustrating. It's makes me angry. But it also kind of does that irritate. It's fine for me to kind of sit with that frustration and shame and guilt, and that doesn't really, you know. So then there's an irritation in, right? Okay, so what are you doing about that? What are you making happen?
Saying again, you know, from the shame to the guilt to the responsibility, in terms of white men. More generally speaking, you talk about an irritation and a deep frustration, but there seems to also be, you know, something within you that's moving you forward. But before kind of get to that, it sounds as if you bumped up against something. You know, how would you describe what you're bumping up against?
I feel it's you know, you asked me what do I value and appreciate. When I think about appreciation and I think about, you know, what comes up for me there is, I guess I appreciate ease with which I've, you know, I managed to navigate the world around me and opportunities I've had. Over the last few weeks, I've kind of recognized that some of that it's been made easy just because I'm a white man. Nothing to do with me, as me. You know, it's me, my color, my whiteness has made things easier for me. You know, I've worked quite a lot internationally, and I recognize that some of that has come very easy. You know, I haven't had to fight lots of battles that other people have had to fight. And the border is something around. It's something around kind of matching that ease with a frustration to make more happen. I think there's something around that.
it sounds as if, and I'm just going to use your line, it sounds as if you kind of bumped up against a barrier, a wall, a border. And so I'm going to ask you this question again. And this time, imagine if you jumped over that wall, you jumped that hurdle, that border. What is it that you value and appreciate about you, Andrew Bidnell, being a white man? So just take a minute, just to imagine. Close your eyes, even if it's for a couple of seconds. Imagine that you're on the other side of this now.
Do you know what comes up for me, Carol? Is when I hear you speak about being a Black woman. I want some of that. Right? I want some of your energy and your pride and your passion. Okay. I've heard you speak about being, what being a Black woman it means to you, and you bring that alive. And on the other side of that wall, I want to bring that alive. I don't have that pride and passion.
But you have ease. There's something about you use the language of ease. So how can you use ease to really value who you are? And I'm offering you this because here's the thing: if you can't value your own identity, and you talked about working internationally and with difference across race and gender, how can you value the difference that others bring, that your clients bring? So you talked about.
It's a good. That stops me in my tracks when you say that. When you say that, because that's what I want to do. I want to value the difference, and I feel I do value that difference in what clients bring, what other people bring.
The question, if we stay with, so what is it that you value and appreciate? So I know you see and appreciate that in others. You talked about how you value and appreciate that in me. What is it that you value and appreciate about you and your own identity?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to the opportunities I've had. I value the opportunities I've had to live, work in different cultures, different places. I really value that. I value the learning that I've taken from that, and I challenge myself on whether I'm using that fully. It's one of the reasons I'm involved in the whole Borderless idea, to embrace it more fully, and to work with my learning and more fully, step into that.
So I'm conscious that we could be here for a longer period of time. If we were having this coaching conversation. There are many places that we could go, but I'd just first of all like to acknowledge your courage and your fearlessness for really sitting with this. As I've seen you sit with many things that are uncomfortable and scary, and you've done that in service of yourself and hopefully in service of your clients. Always homework, so continue to dig deep and to really explore what it is that you value about your own, your own identity. But final reflection, really thinking about this conversation we've just had, what is it that you now know that you didn't know before?
Well, I've never sat in a coaching session being observed talking about these topics, and not really knowing what was going to come up here, and and it doesn't really matter. I'm sitting here thinking it doesn't really matter what everyone else is kind of thinking or reflecting on. What matters is there's a bit of as you said that, there's I had the image of a candle kind of burning there, which I want to burn longer, harder, bigger, and so stepping into that kind of area of exploring difference opens up some discomfort, and in that discomfort is, wow, there's lots there.
Great.
There's lots there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're now going to take a deep breath. Me too.
I'm going now. Thank you.
We're now going to go back to Laurie and Paul, who who were kind of, I suppose, little flies on the wall. You were watching and observing. And so what were some of your observations? I'm also noticing quite a lot of chat going on. And just to say that, you know, I took Andrew in a slightly different direction today. So thank you.
Yeah, that was very real and very deep and very light at the same time. So thank you for the whole depth of human experience. And there's a lot of appreciation for that in the chat as well. And so we're here to just unpack a little bit. Paul and I will have some questions for you as well as observations. And we'd love for participants, if you would, or observers, if you would just put in what you noticed. If you remember any elements of the key or the triple helix, or that, you know, moving into that extra 30%. If you see any of that, feel free to add what you've noticed in the chat, and we can try to weave that into the conversation. First of all, I would love to just, for me, there's one thread that felt like tenacity. That's the word I would use. You know, it's provocative questions and it's authenticity and it's all kinds of things. But there was, you were so committed, Carol, so committed to Andrew and having him explore this issue. And that gave you, in my view, gave you permission to ask some pretty powerful questions, provocative questions. Like that one point about what is that responsibility? There was a, I'm the white man, Andrew saying, and there's such responsibility for that. And, you know, we can kind of cover up a lot of stuff with that word, but you weren't given that, you know, you were saying, but what is that responsibility? Not letting him off the hook. There are a few of those. So I just want to hear from both of you what your experience was like in those moments of quite provocative questions and real commitment. Sorry, Paul, does that sound like a good idea?
It sounds like a great idea. Go for it, Laurie.
So maybe Andrew, you go for it as a client.
Yeah. Well, Carol, one thing you do beautifully well, you're provocative with a smile on your face that makes it kind of feel there's no wriggling out of this question, but I'm being held. Yes. You know, that's the kind of that's how I feel. And so, bang, here's a good. Here's something you really need to be thinking about, and let's think about it. You do that so well, so provocative. You know, tenacity is there. Not letting me wriggle. Yeah. You know, and you do that many. You know, I've seen you do that many times, and you do that in such a caring way.
Thank you, Andrew and Laurie, for observing that. I mean, we call that drafting in borderless coaching, and you know, and Paul's going to help me get this right, but there's something to do with Tour de France and, you know, cyclists. Andrew, you'll know this, right? Like if you're in a pack of cyclists and the person in the front, there's some dynamic that causes others behind you to ride faster. It's probably all wrong, but I think it's something like that. But drafting for me is really having an intention and following that and not getting distracted, you know, and really noticing when the client is trying to get away from either the pause is too long or he or she starts talking about everyone else but themselves. In this conversation, it was important to draft after you and just really follow where you know, kind of follow where you were going or not wanting to go. So I kept coming back to that question. So what do you value and appreciate about being a white man? And that's a kind of another important principle in Borderless as well.
Yeah, I love that drafting. Paul, looks like you were going to say.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, for me, you know, I can see a lot of the borderless behaviors, and you know, clearly there's a lot of discomfort that Andrew was embracing, and lots of provocative questions, and hearing you actually value the differences that Andrew was talking about. Sometimes the practices are not as easy to see, so I'd just like to try and bring that out a little bit, and actually start with you, Carol. You know, because I know you, I know that we live in a world where we experience racism, and we read, we hear, we experience racism, and that can give rise to some biases and stereotypes, prejudices that we may have. And as a Black woman, you may have some of those towards Andrew as a white man. So what's the work you've had to do on self, and even in the conversation, what was the work you were doing on self to avoid any of the triggers for yourself and to manage your own biases and prejudices that you may have?
So I've done a lot of work and continue to do a lot of work in this, in this space. So very conscious of what my biases are, what my assumptions are. And in this conversation, the trigger for me was ease. And so I went to, here, the kind of the ease that's related to privilege, which is undeserved, and you've had an easy, does that mean you have an easy life? Because I was listening to what was going off in my head, and I've learned how to notice that. And if you notice, I use the word ease, at some point in the coaching conversation, took the key to unlock something else. So I think what I do there is I take whatever that trigger is, I listen to it, I don't react to it, I kind of hold it out here, and then use it in a different, in a different way. But trust me, those biases, and obviously I know Andrew very, 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 I know Andrew well, and this conversation, because I went in a different direction, we hadn't kind of prepped for it in that way. But those issues and those biases are, they're always in the coaching space. And if I'm going to be of service to my client, I need to know what they are and manage them.
I think if I was to come in as well on that, Paul, I didn't feel judged and I didn't feel labeled, I felt it was about me as an individual rather than about all white men, of which I was, bringing that notion into the conversation. I didn't feel judged at all. I didn't feel labeled at all. Which is, I think, relates to kind of what Paul was saying, and your consciousness of what's going to trigger you or not, and how you hold it. I love that idea of holding it out there.
Absolutely. And also, I think, in Andrew, your conversation, there was, look, I've got this candle and it's brilliant, and I want to do something with it. And so we could have explored this in terms of, so let's look at some of your clients who might be white men or white women, and how can you use this ease and explore those differences in those coaching relationships. So there are many places it could have gone. I was just disciplined.
You have a time commitment.
There's lots of things in the chat as well.
Yes.
Just so much, and thank you all very, very much. Huge thanks to Catherine, really courageous. Thank you, Andrew and Carol, so rich, etc. And the importance of holding this space well. I think someone said, what would the difference be if it was a Black man coaching a white woman? Paul, you might be able to speak to how you might have used the key in that regard.
Well, I guess I've never coached you, Laurie, but we've had lots of conversations, over the past months and years, and I think the application and the principles are very similar. For me, it's first of all about creating that space where Laurie as a white woman can feel safe to be totally open and honest, and any discomfort that she may have, that she knows that she can sit with that discomfort. That would be the first thing. And at the same time, taking her to the edge. And if necessary, beyond the edge, in service of her. And so very similar to yourself, Carol, there would be provocative questions around, what's it like to be a white woman in a particular situation, might be a question I might ask. I might throw in, something around what's your experiences of coaching Black men been like, and intentionally bringing out into the open the differences that are there by virtue of our race and our gender and the intersection of the two in that case. Maybe Laurie, you could speak to when we have had conversations, albeit not pure coaching.
Yeah, I'm not really sure where to go, to be honest, not sure where to go with that. It feels like the same principles come out. And we've had so many wonderful conversations that haven't ever, because you're so chilled, you're Mr. Chill, I've never felt threatened or uncomfortable even in any conversation. So, but if it were a coaching conversation and we were after provocative, that might get interesting. We should give it a try.
We should give it a try.
I think we should do.
I think there's some, if I just jump in, for me as well, I think one of my stretch areas is this idea of embracing the discomfort, which Carol, I think you do well. You do that, and that is a real growth area for me as a coach. I know it makes sense. And we talk about, the zone of uncomfortable discovery, and we know that learning and growth happens outside the comfort zone. But it's a different thing, holding that space for a client, maybe generating that discomfort through provocative questions, holding it. That's a real growth area for me to work with, I think. And I think that's important.
I want to add on to that, because I was just reflecting that Carol's very experienced at this, right? And so a lot of her questions are, she knows how to ask really provocative questions. And there's something unspoken also happening, because she's a Black woman and you're a white man. And if that had been a white man coaching you, asking the same questions, it would have been a completely different thing, I think. What do you think, Andrew?
That's good. A good question. Yeah, I mean, there would be a different dynamic there. The difference between us, there would still be difference between us. Sure. But I tend to feel that we probably wouldn't explore that difference. No, and it's not used. It's kind of, we go to, as I was saying, we go to that kind of commonality, and off we go. But we miss the 30% that you get with borderless coaching.
And I think, sorry, Paul. And then you need to get close, because we're on fire.
Yeah, I was actually going to pull out a question that somebody had asked in the chat.
Okay, go for it.
That builds on that, because the question that Mary, thank you, Mary, for asking this. So this is an example of coaching where Andrew brought a question about using diversity and the blocks that gets in the way of that. So what about when people don't raise it? When it's not an explicit topic of conversation, how do we bring it into the conversation?
I'd love to kind of respond, because I've had quite a number of examples of coaching white men where that has not been the topic, and the topic has been about leadership and how they are leading their team, or a relationship that has soured, or it's often very people related, or personally, or focusing in on self. And on almost every occasion in a coaching relationship, power, privilege, difference, diversity is always going to be at play. Right? So whether, let's call him John, was having a particular challenge with a Sarah, let's explore what you feel the issues are. Now let's look at the differences between you. Tell me about Sarah, where she's from. Is there an age difference? Is there a race difference? What are the differences that are at play there? And that is a way of, not forcing it to come, but there are many times where those kinds of issues come to the fore, and I'm, able to look at that 30% so think about your identity. So as a white man, what impact do you think that might have? How are you using your power, your privilege, either your power in terms of position or whatever else? How might you use that differently? What are some of your values? Your values are also part of your identity. So working with the whole person, regardless of what that issue is, difference is always there. Always.
Andrew, would you like to build on that? Well, either Andrew or Laurie, would you like to build on that yourself, in terms of your own coaching experience?
Well, what I'm learning is, oh, sorry, Laurie, just jump in. What I'm learning is the difference is there, and I've just avoided it. I haven't talked about it. It hasn't been part of the conversation because the focus has been on what we've got in common, and how I can relate to you, how you can relate to me, and all of that stuff has been my that's been my go-to place, if that makes sense. And it's only more recently as that I'm far more conscious of the difference, and then exploring it. And somebody wrote in the chat there, what happens if the difference does not come out, as you've been talking about, what if a client is avoiding that? I think we have to go there. We have to go there as coaches, because it's kind of like there's a treasure chest underneath, that we are completely avoiding if we're not going deeper on that.
And it's something to contract around at the very beginning.
That's part of the Inclusive Alliance. We do contract around, and explaining what who a Borderless coach is, and how we coach in the space, and what the Triple Helix looks like, and permission to explore the whole of you. And the landscape of me, again, is another place where we ask whole of you type questions as well. And also just noticing for us, even in this conversation, the beauty of Borderless is that we all continue to grow and to learn. And language is another important thing. So something here from Len, who said, who responded to something I talked about, undeserved privilege. And Len says, is the privilege undeserved versus unearned? And I think absolutely, it's unearned privilege. Undeserved comes across to me as more of a judgment than unearned, which comes from the way that the cultural system has been set up. And so some learning even from that. So thank you, Len. So we're on 4 minutes past. Do we have any other questions? Please keep the questions.
Yeah.
Please keep these questions coming so that we can respond to them. I think, Andrew, there was a question I asked you and just in our coaching conversation, and you said that and I'm trying to find out where somebody referred to it, and you said that you were feeling uncomfortable. And I think the question was, I think this is from Nathan. It would be interesting to hear why Andrew was uncomfortable with the question.
Help me. There were a few questions there which kind of made me pause.
I think was what is it that you love and appreciate about what is it that you value and appreciate about being a white man? I think that was the question, Nathan. I hope it was. If not, I stand corrected.
Yeah, definitely. There's discomfort with that. What do I value about being a white man? What do I appreciate? Takes me in a different direction in terms of appreciating, and that takes me to that kind of place of ease or opportunities that I've had. What do I value? The value is I guess I struggle that I've deserved that, I have earned that. It's happened, but not because of me. And that's why that question around valuing valuing me as a white man, I still wrestle with that question. I do wrestle with that question. I don't know if that answers. Was it Nathan's point there? But it's putting a value. I find that hard.
And it's interesting because when we've done this work, elsewhere, what do I find that in the coaching relationships and the sessions that I facilitated, leadership development, targeting women or Black, Asian, and ethnically diverse leaders, you ask that question of Black, Asian, or ethnically diverse leaders, and they can answer very quickly with great comfort. Most of the time, and equally there are times where for many that is a difficult and a hard question to respond to. And in a coaching relationship, where I might be a Black woman and I'm coaching another Black woman or a Black man, when I notice the discomfort with the question, sometimes that's an indication of the threat of the stereotype, or why does my identity matter, and so on and so forth. But there's always somewhere, there's absolutely always somewhere to go with that. Someone else asked, on a scale of 1 to 10, how uncomfortable were you, Andrew, in that conversation with me? Where 10 is just deeply uncomfortable and wants to leave, and 1 was like, well, no, well, I don't know, whichever way you want to use that.
Well, I stayed, whoever asked that question. I did not press leave on my Zoom call. And I don't actually, to be honest with you, I don't know whether it had anything to do with anybody else being there, just the conversation. I felt uncomfortable. Maybe I would say I'll put it maybe a 6 or a 7.
Okay.
I felt held and there was discomfort.
And how about you,
But
Carol?
you held me.
Oh, I would say it ranged from, you know, sometimes I did feel really comfortable and congruent. So I would be about a 7 or an 8. And then there were times I felt like a 3, you know, so I was oscillating. I was kind of oscillating between those questions. Someone else has asked, and this comes up a lot, and you know, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about what's emerging in terms of borderless, but does class come into it? So class is another dimension of difference, and that's also explored under the borderless methodology, and there is always an intersection. So intersectionality is equally an area of commitment for us in terms of borderless. As you know, we have led an important piece of research called Different Women, Different Places. So intersectionality is not just a thing, it's real and has been traditionally ignored by you know, whether it's diversity and inclusion or in the coaching space. So absolutely, those things come up.
I just noticed, Carol, just to jump in, that Nathan, you know, white men, while acknowledging their privilege, must not be bogged down by white guilt. And I think that's a great kind of challenge to me, comment, and I agree full-heartedly. And I would say to all the other white male coaches out there, you know, that's why we've got to work with this. We've got to do stuff, and that's so. Yeah, thank you.
And I love what you had said at the very end of the coaching, Carol, about, you know, if we can't value self, it's really, and where we come from, it's hard to value the difference. I think I've heard you say that possibly many times, but it really rang true when you close the coaching session, or you know, near the end of the coaching session. And to watch that in action. So
I think it's a myth that we can, and in Borderless we explore the different ways in which privilege shows up, and what that looks like. And when we've talked about, and I think Nathan talked about white guilt. I mean, I think we had this conversation before, and I was saying that, you know, to be an ally, to really be a coach that's committed to anti-racism, what's important is that you do work on your own stuff. And I talked about this notion of, if we think about Black Lives Matter and Black people being at war, constantly at war. This is not going away. It is a real thing. And, you know, you talk about being a white ally who's sitting on the sidelines and saying, I can't really talk about this. I really want to help you, but I can't really because I'm full of shame and guilt. And so then I try and stop the fight, but I can't stop the fight that I'm in. And the expectation is that I help to fix that guilt or somehow make it better. And that's not the game. So it's not even a game. That's not the thing. And so thank you for whoever said it's really important to move through that zone of uncomfortable discovery to a place of growth, where we move through shame, guilt, and use that in a different way. So here we are. So much to talk about, so much more to explore. And this was a taste of Borderless that we wanted to offer you this afternoon. And I really thank you all very much. There's just so much coming through in terms of the chat. Sounds as if we need to build on this, and very much our intention. So Paul, is this the place where I talk about that?
Yeah, I think, Carol, we had said we would finish at 1:15, so if you
Yes.
take a couple of minutes to close down, but we are going to stay on until 1:30. So anybody that wants to stay and ask further questions or make further comments, please do so.
So please make sure that we have set up a Facebook group. Please join our Facebook group. Also follow me as Carol Campaign at LinkedIn, and also the diversity practice as well. Our intention is to build on Borderless. We think it's integral to our coaching, to coaches and to coach practice. And in the new year, we will be launching Borderless Coaching as a program. We're working through that as we speak, and we're going to make sure that we're ICF accredited and on all of those other things. And this will be a real important foundation. I don't want to call it a top-up for coaches. I think it is really fundamental and a foundation for coaches, because difference, as we said, are always in the coaching space. So I think without much ado, unless there are any questions, we've got 2 minutes left. This is great.
Can I just add on one point to what you were just saying? Somebody in the chat box had said in his or her experience back in coach training, there wasn't anything about differences included in that coach training. And I think we've all had that experience, or had that not experience, right? And in terms of a top-up, it's not a top-up at all. This is an essential add-on, that we all need so that we can coach across differences and use all our other coaching skills, but really apply them in a particular way. So I'm just really passionate that we have this extra piece.
Yeah.
Essential.
And we are too. And also, just to say, this is also, we can be real vehicles for change and transformation in a world that needs us and the gift that we bring. So thank you all very much indeed. For those who have to go, have a great evening. Continue to explore your borders. Continue to step up and to step in. And we will be back here, by God's grace, in the new year. So thank you. Now, as we said, we'll be here for another 15 minutes in the event that people have additional questions. Thank you and good evening to everyone else. Oh yeah, we wave, don't we?
We can wave.
That's the thing.
Carol, there were a couple of kind of questions that people were asking, and maybe it's just about making some of the things I think you've already said, making it a little bit more explicit. So where you don't have race in the coaching space, so where it's a white woman and a white woman coach, a white woman client, where it's a white man and a white male client, to what extent should we still be addressing race in that coaching conversation?
Although race is a social construct, everyone has a race. This notion that, you only have a race if you're a person of color, I really want to kind of abuse that myth. So race is always is always, even if you're a white man and another white man, it is part of your identity. And I think exploring that, understanding that, reflecting upon that. So when I coach a Black woman, race is there, right? It's absolutely there. It's always there. I don't know how to emphasize it anymore. I think that's really something worth unpacking, because this notion that it only applies to a certain group of people and not to all of us is something that we need to absolutely challenge, and that's what Borderless does.
You also talked earlier about coaching someone about their relationship with other people in their world, and that's another application, another level of application that's really important. So as you coach someone, if I coach a white woman, there's still a lot that we can explore for the sake of her interacting with others in her life.
Absolutely.
Right.
Somebody
Thank
had
you.
had a hand raised. I don't know.
Yes. Anybody that's raising your hand, could you just put your question in the chat or on the Q&A, and we will ask it. I'll ask it of the panelists.
A French, I've also got this, a French man and a German man who are both white. It's different. So ethnicity is another dimension, of difference. You know, that's another layer in and of itself, the cultural differences. And so when we look at immersion as part of the Borderless model, we look at those cultural differences as well, and what that might mean and how that shows up and so on and so forth. So definitely, yes.
And somebody also had asked a little while ago, what might be an example of borderless coaching around one of the other dimensions of diversity?
So Paul, I think you mentioned, how this kicked off for me was my relationship with John, and he's remained a steadfast, good friend of mine. And the differences that we had, and one of them was race and gender, but the other one was around sexual orientation. And he had to make a big, major decision about ending a role that he had for about 25 years and couldn't find the courage to do that. And so we used his sexual orientation, that part of his identity. We went to place so where have you used courage? And he talked about his parents being Presbyterian and coming from the church and so on and so forth, and how difficult it was for him to come out. And we, I used that as a place of, okay, so that was where you were fearless, right? That was the moment that you were fearless. How can you draw on that fearlessness to make this decision? It was a time, when you talk about unlocking and the key, and it just opened up all kinds of things for him, all kinds of possibilities and options, and so grounded again in that part of his identity and knowing the difficult journey that he had traveled and the choices that he made and confronting what was difficult and hard for him. He did it. So there are many ways in which we can use all of the dimensions of diversity in the coaching space.
There's a question here, I think, from Mark, which, if I summarize it, I think what he's asking is, he's always experienced coaching as the coach rather than as the client, and it's the client that tends to be doing all the work. Is a deeper coaching relationship about getting to know each other more? And is that when Borderless coaching really kicks in? So it's really picking up, I think, on our concept of inclusive connection and on the triple helix that you were talking about, Laurie, before. So I wonder whether maybe Laurie or Andrew, whether maybe you could have a go at answering this first.
Andrew, you want to go?
Sure. I think I'm seeing Mark's comment there. Experience of coaching as the coachee, so kind of on the receiving end. I think one of the things around Borderless that I view is kind of using self. Using self and the different. It's why Carol, your invitation to me to be clear about my identity and what I value about that is such important work for me as a coach, to be able to bring that to the conversation with the coachee and enable them to explore their own identity and who they are, and using self can really help to do that, I think, sometimes. So it's I think the traditional kind of coaching training that I've always done, focus on the client. Coach asks a lot of questions, don't say too much about, it's not about you, it's about them, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's all well and good, and there is difference in the space between us, whether it's a white man and I'm a white coach, whatever it is. We could have gone to the same school, there's going to be difference. We could have grown up in Birmingham together, there's still difference. And so using self as part of that difference, I think is that That's the bit I would draw on. Laurie, I don't know.
For the sake of the clients.
For
You
the
know,
sake
if
of, yeah.
there's something here that we can use for the sake of the client, great. It isn't just, oh, about me. Oh, look, I'm a white woman. You know, it's how can that be of service? It's like a tool sitting there waiting to be used, and to not use it because I'm supposed to not have it be about me is, you know, letting something really important go.
Yeah.
Leveraging it.
Hey, I love that. I love that. It's a tool, not to be, you know, let me get my toolkit out and we'll go through some tools, but I'm avoiding the whole tool that's here. I love that, Laurie. That's a great,
This tool is here. And this tool can be so delicious and so useful, and so empowering and inspirational. And it can be a tool that is dull and ineffective. You know, I know of many people, and you know, myself included, and this is not about Laurie, you know, historically walking away from a coaching relationship because he just, coach didn't get me, counselor did not get me at all, couldn't work with one race, couldn't work with my faith. And so those integral aspects of who I am had to be left at the door. And I think with one person, who shall remain nameless, it was, well, can you not get that support elsewhere, but not necessarily here? Because I don't have a faith. Whereas for, you know, for me and for other clients I've spoken to about this, that's a powerful resource.
Yeah.
Right. So religion and belief, again, is another area that is important to explore. And Laurie and I have explored that in our coaching relationship. But there's so many dimensions of who we are that we just have stepped over. And I just wonder the impact that has had in the coaching world.
There's a question in the Q&A, which I just wanted to pick up on. Picking up on the coach and client relationship and Laurie's comment on contracting. Can I ask for this to be expanded on, please? So a little bit more about contracting.
Yeah, I used the word contracting, and I didn't mean that as the contractual relationship that has to do with money and that kind of thing. It's the interpersonal contracting, designing an alliance. A lot of people call it in the coactive world, we call it designing an alliance. That happens at the beginning of a coaching relationship. How do we want to be together in this coaching relationship? What if it goes, goes off the rails in some way, or this or that? And what's a pace? How much challenge? How much support? And can we use ourselves? Can we use our differences? That might come up at some point. Do we have permission for that? And having a bit of a conversation about that. So in short, that's what I meant.
Yeah, and that's part of our inclusive alliance. So it is a design alliance, but we kind of change the name so that we are kind of contracting around use of self, also using the dynamics of difference between us. So we contract upfront about that as we explain that the Borderless framework and what that is and how we use it. So that's exactly what that looks like. So there are no surprises, but always in service of the client, right? Always in service of the client.
Underline
that. And you know, and when we do Borderless next year, we're going to have a conversation about the client's agenda, and because that's an important part of traditional framework. So it'll be a combination of lots of discussion, very experiential, lots of learning, new tools to go away and change the world.
That's what it's really all about.
Ultimately, where we're going, no doubt about that. Any other questions? Is it possible not to bring? Oh, Catherine is asking. Hello, Catherine. Is it possible to not bring difference into the coaching space?
Well, I think Andrew was talking about it, and I can say this. I've been trying not to for many years. So, and I would say have successfully coached around many topics, perhaps not all topics, especially that one that Carol we talked about in our previous webinar. Yeah. We didn't approach that topic because we didn't have the foundation for it. But there's so much more possible if we do use the difference.
And I mean, come back to that thing again, but difference is there anyway. It's, are we choosing to use it or not? I think that's the question, right? So you can't not bring it. It is there, but are we choosing to tap into it as a positive resource? And I think that's what this is very much about. That's what it's about.
Catherine's build on that, you know, it's in our bodies and minds as we enter, whether or not we know or acknowledge it, is absolutely right. It's kind of, you know, it's, you know, I noticed maybe I've avoided it for fear of creating discomfort. Whereas discomfort is what we should be kind of working with, because that's where the learning is, right? It kind of sounds so kind of simple, but I haven't embraced it enough, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, all these things you talk about, you know, naturally creative, resourceful, whole. How are we really tapping into the whole bit or the creative bit, or being resourceful? Being resourceful means using all the resources that are available to us. Yeah. So that's, I think that's the question that we are, you know, that we're responding to.
And discomfort points to some of those resources.
Absolutely.
I love that, because we all know that in the discomfort is where the learning is, but we completely ignored this whole, you know, bucket of discomfort. Oh no, not that discomfort. I'll use this discomfort for learning.
Yeah, and that's not.
And what I would add to that is, you know, let's recognize some of us who have been clients. Yeah, for us, the discomfort is there, whether the coach recognizes it or not. Yeah, because it can be discomforting, because we bring ourselves as a client and we bring our differences, we bring our race, yeah, and we're being coached and we bring our biases. There's a discomfort that is there from the beginning, and whether the coach recognizes it or not.
Yeah,
absolutely. And so then when we talk about the client's agenda, is it the client's agenda when we feel, well, that's an area that I as a coach don't want to go to. I don't want to go there. Yeah. You're not holding the client's agenda, you're holding your own agenda.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
And that comes back to contracting also, is to say, you know, tell me when there's discomfort. Can we dive into that? Because there's some.
Right. So Carol, Andrew, Laurie, you know, I'm conscious that we can carry on talking forever and ever, but it has come to that time where I think we need to release everybody for now. Carol, if you had some final words you wanted to share before we leave.
I think it's, you know, as everyone says, thank you so much. This is the end of what is, and the beginning of what is to come. Please join the Facebook group. I can't keep getting that mixed up. We have work to do. It's as simple and as straightforward as that, right? Coaching is that powerful vehicle. Let's use it for good, and also really extend and expand our coaching practice so that we're relevant to the world that we're in right now, and we can meet the needs of everyone and not just someone. So thank you, and hopefully we will see you again in 2021. May 2021 bring us joy and peace and health and all those things that, you know, we richly deserve. Do take good care of yourself, and good evening.